The royal family was lovely to Diana until the wedding day. Then everything changed. But here's what's strange. When you look at other royal families in Europe, Denmark, Norway, Sweden, this doesn't happen. Commoner women marry in, and they're welcomed, protected, supported. The Scandinavian monarchies figured out how to integrate outsider women without destroying them. The British monarchy, and specifically Charles, chose a different path. So this isn't a story about Charles being a bad husband. That's been done 1,000 times. This is a prosecutorial case. Charles, enabled by the institutional machinery around him, systematically destroyed the woman who bore his heirs. And we can prove it because every other European crown prince in the same era figured out how not to do this. The brutality was a choice, not an inevitability. Let's present the evidence. Lady Diana Frances Spencer entered Charles's orbit in the summer of 1980. She was 19, a kindergarten assistant at the Young England School in Pimlico. And she possessed exactly what the institution demanded: aristocratic lineage stretching back 5 centuries, a family seat at Althorpe, connections to the establishment going back generations. She wasn't some random outsider. The Spencers had served British royalty for half a millennium. Charles was 31, under increasing pressure to marry. His previous relationship with Camilla Shand had ended when she married Andrew Parker Bowles in 1973. Though ended is perhaps too strong a word. Charles maintained the connection. He always maintained the connection. That would prove to be the defining fact of Diana's life. The initial reception was warm. Queen Elizabeth approved the match. Prince Philip expressed support. The media christened Diana Shy Di, emphasizing her youth and perceived innocence. When Charles proposed in February 1981, the palace moved swiftly to announce the engagement on February 24th. A fairy tale made real. No institutional concerns voiced publicly. The machinery appeared to be welcoming her with open arms. And then, days before the wedding, Diana discovered a bracelet in Charles's office. The piece was from Asprey's, gold, lapis pendant, engraved with the letters F and G, Fred and Gladys. The private nicknames Charles and Camilla Parker Bowles had used during their long relationship. Diana recognized the significance immediately. Her fiancé was sending a farewell gift to his mistress, days before marrying her. She confronted him. Charles dismissed her concerns entirely. The gift was from a friend. What was wrong with that? Everything. Everything was wrong with that. The wedding proceeded as scheduled. On July 29, 1981, approximately 750 million people watched Diana walk down the aisle of St. Paul's Cathedral. That ivory taffeta gown designed by David and Elizabeth Emanuel. The 25-foot train, longest in royal wedding history, a cascade of silk and tulle that seemed to embody the grandeur of the occasion. The world saw a fairy tale unfolding in real time. And there, in the congregation, sat Camilla Parker Bowles, pale gray dress, veiled pillbox hat. The woman who held Charles's heart, present at the ceremony, while the bride walked toward a marriage already betrayed. Diana would later say she spotted Camilla instantly as she walked down the aisle, knew exactly who she was, knew exactly what she represented. The honeymoon aboard the royal yacht Britannia, which departed in early August 1981, delivered immediate confirmation that Diana's fears were justified. She noticed cufflinks on Charles's wrists, 2 entwined C's, like the Chanel logo. In her own words, recorded years later for Andrew Morton. On our honeymoon, cufflinks arrive on his wrists, 2 C's entwined like the Chanel C. Got it. One knew exactly. So I said, "Camilla gave you those, didn't she?" He said, "Yes, so what's wrong? They're a present from a friend." And boy, did we have a row. The heir to the British throne wore jewelry from his mistress during his honeymoon with his new wife. Think about that for a moment. Not hiding the affair, not even trying to conceal it. Wearing Camilla's gift openly in front of Diana on their honeymoon. The cruelty wasn't accidental. It was displayed. Charles wanted Diana to know her place from the very beginning. No palace authority intervened. No courtier expressed concern. The message was unmistakable. Diana was expected to accept her position. And that position was second. The early years of the marriage established a pattern that would continue until the bitter end. Charles remained emotionally absent, cold, distracted. He continued his friendship, that careful institutional word, with Camilla. Diana, isolated within palace walls, struggled to understand the world she had entered. She gave birth to Prince William on June 21, 1982. Charles was present at the birth, a break with royal tradition. He had wanted a daughter. When William emerged, Charles reportedly remarked on the baby's appearance in ways Diana found hurtful. But she had produced an heir. She had fulfilled her primary institutional function. Prince Harry arrived on September 15, 1984. Another son, the spare. Charles's reaction, according to Diana's account, was disappointment that the child was a boy and had inherited the Spencer red hair rather than the Windsor coloring. Whether this account is precisely accurate or colored by later bitterness, it captured something true about the emotional texture of the marriage. Diana felt constantly criticized, constantly found wanting, constantly reminded that she had failed to meet expectations she didn't fully understand. And throughout these years, Charles maintained his connection to Camilla. This is where most Diana stories focus on the affair as a personal betrayal. Husband cheats on wife, tale as old as time. But that framing misses the larger pattern. Charles was awful, but Charles was also protected by the institution, enabled by it. The question isn't just why Charles behaved badly. The question is why the palace system allowed it, encouraged it, covered for it. Diana's public profile grew exponentially with each passing year. She became the most photographed woman in the world. Magazine covers everywhere. Global adoration that far exceeded anything Charles generated. When they appeared together on official tours, the crowds chanted, "Diana, Diana." They wanted her, not him. They craned their necks to see her side of the car. And that became the problem. Her popularity exceeded Charles's. This created profound institutional tension. The palace began to perceive Diana not as an asset to the monarchy, but as a threat to its established hierarchy. More specifically, a threat to the future king's standing. Charles felt upstaged, diminished. The wife who was supposed to support him from the shadows was outshining him completely. Patrick Jeffson served as Diana's private secretary from 1987 to 1996. His account in Shadows of a Princess illuminates the apparatus that surrounded and ultimately suffocated her. The courtiers and private secretaries who staffed the royal household, sometimes called the Grey Men, maintained loyalty to the institution itself rather than to individual family members. Their job was protecting the monarchy's reputation. When that meant protecting Charles from the consequences of his own choices, that's what they did. When Diana's interests aligned with institutional interests, she received support. When those interests diverged, which happened more and more frequently as her marriage deteriorated, she found herself isolated, undermined, denied backing. The staff who should have been her allies were reporting to Charles's people. The system that should have protected her was systematically working against her. The palace briefing system became the primary weapon. Favored journalists received information from palace sources, allowing the institution to shape media coverage while maintaining plausible deniability about the origins of damaging stories. As Diana's popularity threatened to overshadow Charles, coordinated narratives emerged, characterizing her as unstable, manipulative, difficult, mentally unwell in ways that undermined her credibility as a witness to her own marriage. Charles's camp, and make no mistake, there were camps now, his and hers, fed stories to sympathetic reporters. Diana was demanding. Diana was irrational. Diana was suffering from psychological problems that made her an unreliable narrator of her own experience. The same palace system that could have protected Diana was weaponized against her. By the late 1980s, the marriage existed in name only. Charles had resumed his full relationship with Camilla, if it had ever truly stopped. They spoke constantly, met regularly. The affair was an open secret within royal circles. Diana knew, the staff knew, the Queen almost certainly knew, and the institution did nothing. In June 1992, the facade collapsed entirely. Andrew Morton published Diana, Her True Story, based on secret tape recordings Diana had made describing her experience within the royal family. The book revealed everything. The affair with Camilla, Diana's struggles with bulimia and self-harm, the institutional hostility she had faced since her wedding day. Morton didn't identify Diana as his source, but the intimacy of the details made the origin obvious. The monarchy reeled. The Queen declared 1992 her annus horribilis in a speech at Guildhall on November 24th, the horrible year. Charles and Diana separated in December 1992, with Prime Minister John Major announcing the separation to Parliament. The fairy tale was officially over. But Charles wasn't finished damaging Diana's reputation. In January 1993, transcripts of secretly recorded phone conversations leaked to the press. The Camillagate tapes, as tabloids dubbed them, captured intimate exchanges between Charles and Camilla from 1989. The conversations were explicit, embarrassing. Charles infamously expressed a desire to be reincarnated as one of Camilla's personal items. The specific item was crude enough that newspapers debated whether to print it. The tapes proved what Diana had been saying for years. The affair was real, it was ongoing, and it had been happening throughout her marriage. Any other man would have been destroyed by such exposure. But Charles had the institution behind him. The palace weathered the scandal. Courtiers worked to rehabilitate his image. And in June 1994, Charles took an extraordinary step. He confessed to adultery on national television. The interview was with Jonathan Dimbleby, a sympathetic journalist who had been granted unprecedented access for a documentary and authorized biography. When asked directly whether he had been faithful to Diana, Charles admitted he had committed adultery, but only, he claimed, after the marriage had irretrievably broken down. The framing was careful. He wasn't a cheater. He was a man trapped in a loveless marriage who had eventually found comfort elsewhere. Diana watched that interview. 25 million other Britons watched it too. Her husband had just told the nation he had cheated on her, while simultaneously implying the marriage's failure was somehow mutual, somehow shared, somehow not entirely his fault. The institutional rehabilitation of Charles was underway. Diana responded in November 1995 with her own television interview, the famous Panorama Conversation with Martin Bashir. Watched by nearly 23 million viewers, Diana spoke directly about the affair. "There were 3 of us in this marriage," she said, "so it was a bit crowded." She questioned whether Charles was suited to be king. She admitted to her own affair with James Hewitt. She described the palace as an enemy, the institution as hostile to her survival. The interview was devastating. The Queen reportedly demanded that Charles and Diana divorce as quickly as possible. The damage to the monarchy's reputation was severe. And yet, and this is crucial, the palace briefing system continued to operate against Diana even as the divorce proceedings unfolded. She was still being undermined, still being characterized as unstable, still being attacked through coordinated media campaigns. The divorce was finalized on August 28, 1996. Diana retained the title Diana, Princess of Wales, but lost the style Her Royal Highness, a distinction that mattered enormously within royal protocol. The loss of HRH signaled her formal expulsion from the institution's inner circle. She was out. Charles had won. He got to keep his mistress. He got to keep his future as king. He got to keep the institutional machinery that had protected him throughout. Diana got a settlement and a title, and the knowledge that she had spent 15 years of her life in a rigged game she was never meant to win. Now, I need to pause here and make something clear. The British approach, the briefings, the isolation, the coordinated media campaigns, the systematic destruction of outsider women, is not how monarchies have to work. We know this because 3 Scandinavian monarchies faced the identical challenge in the years following Diana's death. Each made fundamentally different choices. Crown Prince Haakon of Norway met Mette-Marit Jessem Høiby in 1999. Her background presented challenges that far exceeded anything Diana brought. Mette-Marit was a single mother. Her son's father was a convicted drug offender. She was publicly known for involvement in Oslo's social scene where, as contemporary reporting documented, drugs were readily available. Norwegian public opinion was initially hostile. So what did the Norwegian institution do? They protected her. King Harald publicly approved the marriage. Haakon defended his bride without equivocation. On August 25, 2001, they married at Oslo Cathedral. No briefing campaigns, no media destruction. Crown Princess Mary of Denmark was an Australian marketing executive with no aristocratic connections whatsoever when she met Crown Prince Frederik at a Sydney bar during the 2000 Olympics. The Danish Parliament passed legislation granting her citizenship. Queen Margaretha publicly acknowledged the relationship. They married on May 14, 2004, and approval ratings for the Danish monarchy surged to 82%. Crown Princess Victoria of Sweden married Daniel Wessling, her personal trainer from a gym, on June 19, 2010. He received the title Prince Daniel and Duke of Västergötland. No destruction required. 3 Scandinavian heirs, same era, same challenge of integrating outsider spouses. All 3 chose to protect their partners. All 3 defended them publicly. All 3 ensured the institutional machinery worked to support the newcomers rather than destroy them. Charles had the same choice available to him. He could have defended Diana, could have protected her from the courtiers and the briefings and the media attacks, could have chosen his wife over his mistress, could have done what Haakon and Frederik and Victoria did. He didn't. He chose Camilla. Again and again and again, for 15 years, he chose Camilla. And the institution backed his choice. On August 31st, 1997, Diana died in a car crash in the Pont de l'Alma tunnel in Paris. Her companion Dodi Fayed and driver Henri Paul also died. Bodyguard Trevor Rees-Jones survived with severe injuries. She was 36 years old. I need to address something briefly. There are unanswered questions about her death. I'm not going to pretend there aren't. The Operation Paget inquiry, released in December 2006, ran over 800 pages and concluded the death was a tragic accident caused by Henri Paul's intoxication and reckless driving to evade pursuing paparazzi. The inquiry addressed persistent questions: irregularities regarding Henri Paul's blood samples, the unidentified white Fiat Uno that witnesses reported seeing, the security arrangements that left Diana without palace protection that night, and concluded these anomalies did not support conspiracy theories. The official verdict stands as the legal record. What cannot be disputed is this: Diana spent her final years believing she was under surveillance, believing powerful forces within the establishment wished her gone. documenting those fears in letters to trusted friends. Whether those fears were justified paranoia or accurate perception of threat, they reflected 16 years of institutional hostility that had taught her, through relentless experience, that the palace system operated against her interests at every turn. She had been fed into a machine, and she hadn't survived it. There's one more detail that reframes the entire narrative, a moment of petty revenge that speaks to institutional memory and personal loyalty. On April 9, 2005, Charles finally married Camilla Parker Bowles in a civil ceremony, followed by a blessing service at St. George's Chapel, Windsor. Nearly 8 years had passed since Diana's death. The institution that had protected Charles throughout his affair, that had briefed against his first wife, that had facilitated the destruction of the most beloved woman in the world, was formally welcoming his mistress into the family. Queen Elizabeth II attended the blessing service, wearing a creamy white coat and hat with subtle yellow fleck. Let that sink in. The Queen, who had spent her entire reign adhering to strict protocols about appropriate dress, chose to wear white to her son's wedding blessing. In royal protocol, this was extraordinary. Mothers of the groom do not wear white. It's the bride's color. Camilla wore cream silk chiffon for the civil ceremony and pale blue for the blessing. The Queen chose white. Unless the statement being made transcends fashion, the Queen had watched Charles conduct his affair. She had watched Diana suffer. She had watched the institution she headed destroy the mother of her grandsons. She had been constrained by her role, unable to intervene directly in the workings of the palace machinery. But on the day Charles married the woman for whom he had betrayed Diana, Queen Elizabeth wore white. Whether conscious revenge or unconscious memorial, the choice spoke volumes. The institution had won. Charles got his mistress, but the Queen, in her own quiet way, registered her dissent. She remembered Diana. Perhaps, in the end, that memory was all the loyalty anyone inside the machine could offer. The pattern didn't end with Diana. Prince Harry was 12 years old when he walked behind his mother's coffin on September 6, 1997. Head bowed, face composed in the way children learn to compose their faces when the world is watching them grieve. He grew up inside the institution that had systematically destroyed his mother. He understood its mechanisms in ways outsiders never could. In 2016, Harry began a relationship with Meghan Markle. She was an American actress, Northwestern University graduate, successful career woman, humanitarian, biracial, divorced. Her background differed from Diana's in many respects, but shared the essential quality the British institution cannot tolerate. She was an outsider. The engagement was announced in November 2017. Initial coverage was positive. Harry and Meghan married at St. George's Chapel, Windsor on May 19, 2018. The institution appeared to welcome her. Between 2018 and 2020, the machinery activated. Media narratives emerged characterizing Meghan as difficult, demanding, ambitious, destabilizing. The identical language deployed against Diana 30 years earlier. Stories appeared in coordinated clusters about alleged mistreatment of staff, protocol violations, unseemly ambition, family conflicts, anonymous palace sources, the same briefing system, the same patterns, the same destruction dressed up as organic public opinion. Harry saw it clearly, perhaps more clearly than anyone else could. He'd lived inside the institution his entire life, watched what it did to his mother, walked behind her coffin. And now he watched the same mechanisms activating against Meghan. The same courtiers, the same briefing channels, the same media relationships. In his public statements, Harry explicitly identified history repeating. Palace staff briefing against his wife exactly as they had briefed against Diana. In January 2020, Harry and Meghan announced they would step back from senior royal duties. They relocated to California. extracted themselves from the institutional machinery before it could complete its work. For the first time in modern royal history, someone inside the British institution saw the machine clearly, understood its function, and chose to remove his family before the pattern reached its conclusion. Harry did what Charles never did. He protected his wife. He chose her over the institution. He walked away from the palace, the titles, the life he had been born into, because he recognized that staying would destroy Meghan the way staying had destroyed Diana. The contrast illuminates everything about Charles. He had options. He had choices. He could have protected Diana at any point over 15 years. He could have defended her against the briefings, demanded the courtiers support her, told Camilla the relationship was over. Crown princes across Europe were doing exactly that for their wives at the same historical moment. Charles chose differently. He chose Camilla. He chose the institution. He chose his own comfort over his wife's survival, and the institution backed him every step of the way. The documented record establishes an institutional pattern within the British monarchy. Outsider women receive warm reception before marriage, systematic hostility after, ultimate destruction or exile as the outcome. Diana was destroyed, Meghan fled. The comparative evidence from Scandinavia proves this approach is neither necessary nor inevitable. It's a choice the British monarchy makes, again and again, with full knowledge of the consequences. Which brings us to the question that sits underneath all of this. Maybe the problem isn't who wears the crown. Maybe it's that the crown exists at all. Denmark, Norway, and Sweden maintained their monarchies while choosing humanity over institutional preservation at any cost. The British monarchy chose differently, chose to enable Charles's affair, chose to destroy Diana, chose to repeat the pattern with Meghan, chose, over and over, to sacrifice outsider women on the altar of institutional continuity. The fairy tale was never real. The institution was never designed to protect the women who married into it. The machinery was always there, waiting, hidden behind the pageantry and the processions and the wedding dresses with 25-foot trains. Diana walked into that machine on July 29, 1981. She was 19 years old. She believed she was marrying a prince. She was actually being fed to an institution that would spend the next 16 years destroying her, enabled at every turn by the man who had promised to love and cherish her. Charles could have stopped it. He could have protected her. He had the power, the position, the institutional weight to change everything. He didn't. The evidence has been presented. The comparison speaks for itself. And the question remains, how many more women have to be destroyed before we ask whether the institution itself is worth preserving? Subscribe for more stories like this.